Hello everyone, welcome to the first part of the Knights and Merchants expansion map editor guide. The mod itself is based on Knights and Merchants remake, so most of the features are the same, but the expansion mod adds a few new tools that make creating and editing maps much easier. I'm using expansion version 1.12. In this part I'll focus mainly on showing you how to create an average looking map from scratch, how to paint the terrain, how to elevate it and how to diversify it with objects. To create a new map, go to the map editor menu and select the map size in the lower left corner. I chose 96 x 96 tiles. It's a small map but big enough to discuss everything. After clicking create new map, we are taken to the map editor. The new map is nothing more than a green area with slight elevations. To paint the other types of terrain, select the terrain editing page, then the brushes subpage. At the very beginning I painted the places where the specific terrain will be located. I chose the dirt, grass on dirt and grassy sand. I painted the sketch with a size 4 brush because it's just a sketch, the details will be painted with smaller brush. When the sketch is ready, we need to add some details to the terrain by tearing it or adding some irregularities. I use the size 0 brush. It makes easier to control creating the details. To increase the details of the map, using just the terrains, I painted on the border of the terrains some peninsulas and small islands. It creates smooth transition between different types of the terrain. For the dirt terrain, I made islands bigger than for the grass on dirt. In the nature, grass grows much better on land that already has a bit of grass. Since I painted much more grass on the dirt than I had planned, I will connect the dirt area with it, creating a bridge consisting of 3 terrain types: grass, grass on dirt and dirt. Once the terrain the units will be walking on is painted, it's time to paint the mountains. Before I did that, I placed storehouses for the players to make it easier to determine how much space each player needs. First I chose a stone mountain because it is one of the most important resources in the game. I placed 3 mountains next to each other so that the stone mason will have more space to mine. The shape of the mountain varies. It is difficult to say about a standard that occurs in all maps. Map creators experiment by creating various shapes, some more or less detailed. This also applies to the terrain. At the very beginning I created mountains that have smooth edges and add any details later, as in the case of regular terrain. I tried to avoid angular mountains and straight edges. Mountains are uneven in reality, so edges should not be straight but rather jagged. Some terrains don't connect directly to each other, like in this case the grass and dirt and the stone mountain. You have to get around this by painting a terrain that has a transition to both terrains. You don't have to do this though, because there are auto masks, but I'll talk about them in another video. Finally, I added 2 more lakes, one round, the other oblong. I also adjusted the terrain to them so that they didn't have a uniform border. The terrain is ready, so it's time to elevate it. Select the second subpage, Heights. I usually start by raising mountains so that I can adjust the rest of the terrain to them. I select a brush size 2, slope 12 and speed 11. The speed depends on how skilled your hand is. If you are just starting to create maps, I recommend starting with a lower speed such as 6 or 8. I create faults on the mountains. I drag the mouse from the upper left corner to the lower right corner. This way higher brightened peaks will be created and darkened niches right behind it. Just like with painting the terrain, you have to experiment with elevating the mountains. I tried to raise each type of mountain in a different style to reduce the schematic appearance of the map a bit. While elevating the stone mountain, I checked whether units can walk on all tiles on the edge. Then the stonemason will have no trouble mining the stone. At the bottom of the screen, using the horn icon, open additional menu and use the slider to check the properties of the tile. To check whether you can walk on a given tile, we move the slider to 1. Each tile highlighted in green means that you can walk on that tile. I elevate the terrain from the upper left corner to the lower right because when I paint the other way, strange elevations are created. The terrain generates triangular shading and it doesn't look too good, but maybe someone uses it. I personally avoid it. I usually elevate walkable terrain with a size 3 brush. The slope is adapted to the type of terrain. For dirt, sand and desert I use 15, for grassy terrain 10 or 11, for snowy terrain 11 or 12. This way each terrain will be different from the other. I elevate the ground with the same mouse movements as the mountains, sometimes diagonally, sometimes circular movements, and sometimes I even scribble. You have to experiment with everything because maybe you will find a method that suits you. I made the dirt the most mountainous because it is more susceptible to weather and terrain erosion. The grass is smoother because it is harder for water to move it or modify it. There are several ways to place the objects. You can place them manually with the object brush or using object patterns. I start with trees so that I can later adapt other objects to the forest I create. I checked a few maps and noticed that trees in the forest are not placed in the one line quite often. Each next tree placed tries not to cross the same tile. This creates a randomness. Since patterns make placing objects much easier, I'll use them. This is the last subpage in the terrain editing page. First, mark the terrain in blue, and when the selection is ready, choose which pattern to use. Currently I only have one collection of patterns and I'll use it. You can use a pattern by double clicking on it in the pattern list or exiting the patterns window and clicking use pattern. Just like with the elevations of the terrain, I tried to place different types of trees on each subsequent terrain. I used deciduous trees on grassy terrain and coniferous trees on earthy terrain. But you can't place a forest in every place, you have to build city somewhere, but this terrain can also be diversified. First I chose a pattern of dead bushes and placed them in points a little apart from each other. Then I used water sticks on the dirt. In this case I used a sized 1 brush. The sticks in the pattern are quite densely spaced, so to reduce the density I don't apply it on every tile. On the grass I generate green bushes, grass and possibly flowers. To the forest I added the logs and using the object brush also mushrooms. At the end I added stones that appear near mountains or in higher places on dirt or sandy terrain. I place them much less often on the grass. I forgot about the lakes, so I corrected them only after placing the objects. I slightly raised the water areas to get the effect of waves. These are lakes, so I do it gently. Larger elevations mean larger waves, and such waves occur mainly on the sea and the ocean. This is what my map looks like. It maintains an average look according to the standards that have been set by map makers over the years. The map needs to be saved so that you don't accidentally lose the progress you've made. Once saved, the new map will be listed in the map editor menu. In the next part, I'll discuss how to set up the player and classic AI. Thanks for watching, bye!